What's up, guys? Chris Ruediger here with the 615 House. We just had an awesome podcast with very special guest, Alexandra K. We got to talk about her life before moving to Nashville, which entailed so much. It was on a TV show, West Side. It was also working with people like Nelly in the R&B and rap space. And then what her journey's been the past couple years on social media, blowing up on coffee covers on TikTok, and for her original music. And she just got back from a tour with Tim McGraw, which is absolutely insane. The real question is, does she give her friends backstage passes or does she make them sit in the lawn seats? I don't know. You got to watch the podcast to find out. What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the 615 House podcast. It is your host, Chris Ruediger, and here's the coolest part about the podcast. The podcast, we get to interview a bunch of creatives, a bunch of artists, a bunch of influencers, just people that are really making a wave in the Nashville community. And I feel so lucky because today I have such a good friend. I haven't seen you in so long.
I know.
And it is so good to have you back. It is the one and only Miss Alexandra K.
What's up?
What's happening? How are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm great. You just got back from Faster Horses?
Yes, we did Faster Horses this weekend. It was insane. It was my first Faster Horses. It was my first Next from Nashville stage. So really, really pumped. And the crowd showed out.
How many people were there?
When I took the stage, it was 800 to 1,000 under the tent.
Were you just like, oh my God, this is the real deal?
I just you never know. You never know because you have like one artist comes off the stage and then everybody goes and finds another show.
Right.
And then, your crowd will come back or they won't. you don't know because it literally
did your crowd come back?
And then so I walked out and the tent had cleared because the artist before me was off. And so I was just backstage, with knots in my stomach, oh my gosh, please let people be out there. And then I ran out and it was just, completely full. And I was like, what is happening? It's crazy. Amazing. They showed up. It was really, really fun.
They showed up. And they sang the songs.
And they sang the songs. It was really, really fun. And then we did a show with Jordan Davis the next day. And obviously he was hurting because he was on the main stage at Faster.
I actually did see the video of Jordan Davis when he woke up and was hungover in a Waffle House. And he's like, Faster Horses won, me 0.
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
fair.
how do you hang out with Morgan Wallen and Jake Owen after playing in front of 40,000 people and not get hammered?
Not get hammered. Yeah, super fair. But all right, so then well, now I feel bad. Why are you you should be resting. You played Saturday Faster Horses, Sunday with Jordan Davis, and then you showed up here to do this podcast.
Yeah, I love you.
You did not have to do that.
It doesn't matter. I would do anything.
She loves me. It's unbelievable. All right, I feel like I need to brag on you and tell the people, Alexandra K, you've been at the music game for over a decade now, right? Mm-hmm. And it's been a crazy past couple of years. I know that you, and I want to get into this, but you were out doing commercial work and then you were doing R&B and hip hop. And then you come back, you move into country after being on a TV show. And in 2 years, you go from, having a few songs out to millions of streams on your music. You're now opening up for Tim McGraw and just absolutely crushing the game. And it's so cool to see. And I'm just so proud of you, and I'd never get to tell you that. And I'm so happy that you're here because it's going to be awesome. We're going to get into it. So first thing I want to talk about is growing up. Okay. You grow up and you're outside of St. Louis, right?
Yeah.
Small town?
Small town. We're actually on the Illinois side. So we live right on the border of Missouri and Illinois. And so we always say we're from St. Louis because if we say we're from Illinois, everyone thinks we're from Chicago. So we're actually from 5 hours away from Chicago. I can get to downtown St. Louis in 30 minutes. But I'm from Waterloo, Illinois.
Amazing.
That's where I grew up.
Waterloo. I love it. And when you grew up, did you know immediately that you were going to do the whole music thing? Or were you
Absolutely not. We were a sports family, softball to be exact. So
really?
Yes. So we played competitive softball. I started in, there was this elite organization called the Collinsville Extreme. And we started in that organization. I was 11 years old when I started. And I left the organization at 18.
Why'd you leave?
Well, I got offered a bunch of scholarships to go to college, and I decided not to go to college. And so when I decided not to take my scholarships and go to college, I decided that I didn't want to spend that last summer playing elite ball because I knew it wasn't going to be my future. And so I said goodbye to all my friends and the family that raised me.
So were people was your family and friends, were they what the hell? Like,
so
she stopped?
I had been doing musical theater for a while at that point. So they knew that I had the bug, like the artist bug, but they hadn't seen it in action. And I don't think anybody really thought that I was going to take it serious enough to not go to college and to, jump full in.
That's the thing. I think it's like, there's a huge difference between, like she's the girl that, I mean, were you playing like open mics or like gigs around town, or were you like you were still
Well, I had done a couple, and I had cut some songs, and I started writing songs when I was 12. So
okay, so you had been doing it.
Yes, but I didn't share it with like my friends or anything. It was like a very private part of my life that I did. Mm-hmm. I started writing because I felt it was like an outlet for me. So
well, and I think there's a huge difference between like, she plays a couple shows a month, record some records or whatever, and like, she's not going to college because she's going to do this like full time and like try to make a living out of it.
Right.
So how was that conversation with your parents? Like,
it was tough. Well, I had applied to, like the American Musical and Dramatic Academy, and I had applied to New York Film Academy and a couple other performing arts schools, and I got in, but we couldn't afford to send me there. So my parents really put all of the eggs in the basket of you're going to go on a full ride scholarship. And that's why, I trained my entire life for that. Especially since there is no MLB, for softball, and they took it out of the Olympics. So we're college, and then we're done.
Why do they take it out of the Olympics?
I don't know. It was a sad day for everybody because, that was like our top tier as ball players, and it was gone. So
I thought that's what the Olympics was for. It's like every sport is a part of the Olympics, I feel like.
Right. And so, we just knew that college was the end of it. And I just, honestly, like my passion shifted at some point, and I just was so much more passionate about music than I was about playing softball. And to be honest, like it was very, very expensive to be in the organization that we were in. Like we were a very elite team. We went to nationals every single year. Yeah. And so we played tournaments every single weekend. Like I didn't have friends outside of softball really, because I didn't get to hang out with my friends. I was always on the road. So that kind of trained me for being ready to be on the road now.
Right.
Since we traveled our entire lives. And so I had to make the decision once I didn't love it anymore. It was just tiring, and I was just ready to go for my dreams,
I love that.
Yeah.
So, well, obviously you're in country now. Did you grow up listening to country music?
Yes. I grew up listening to everything really. I mean, my dad is like a huge Kiss fan.
I love that.
And my dad always drove me to my tournaments and my practices, and he like drove this like red F-150, and that had a tape player, and he had the same like Kiss cassette that we would just flip,
that's amazing,
over and listen to like Heaven's on Fire and Rock and Roll All Night and Detroit Rec City and
all the jams,
all the good stuff. It was like a greatest hits tape, and so I listened. That will always remind me of him. That classic rock. My mom loved Loverboy and that whole era of music, and so but they always had like 92.3, 93.7, the country stations playing, and that's what I fell in love with. I fell in love with the storytelling.
Yeah. And
it's just at the times when I felt the most alone, like that was what made me feel like I wasn't, So that's why I started writing.
So before you moved to Nashville though, you're doing like commercial work, right? And like and also you were part of like, and I want to get to this, you're part of like an indie label, and you're working with like some people in the hip hop scene, right? Mm-hmm. So how did that come about? So
I started doing commercials and voiceover work when I was, I would say like 16, I think is when I got my first agent. And then, and so I was doing that and the radio voiceover stuff. And then I got into musical theater, and then that became a huge passion of mine. And then that was also part of a big decision of not going to college, so I started visiting these colleges that were offering me scholarships. And the problem was the softball season ran into the season in which all of the theater shows would happen. And I wanted to be a musical theater major. And so I just didn't see a way in which I followed my dreams and, played softball at the same time on scholarship. And so that was really that's what helped me make the decision to say, I'm going to take a year off and figure out what I really want to do.
Right.
Do I want to be a musical theater major, or do I just want to like go for just like a full artist career? And so that's when I decided to do that. But
that's amazing. So you just, okay, so that's a big decision, right? You decide, all right, I'm going to be an artist full time.
Yeah.
How do you make a living? Like, do you start playing shows in your hometown? Did you think to move? Was it like Nashville, LA?
Well, I wanted to move to LA and I saved up all my money and it still was never enough. Mm-hmm. And my parents actually, so when I decided not to go to college, my parents gave me a year. I think it was it was a year. And this is how much we don't know or didn't know about the music business. Like, no one in my family played an instrument. No one was musical. No one went for anything like this. So my parents told me, like, you need to be making a living at doing this and or have a record deal within the first year, or you need to go find somewhere else to live. You can't live with us anymore.
That's insane. Like,
and not in a mean way. Like, that sounds like my parents are mean. They are just like, they were like, you're not going to live under this roof and have us support you if you're not going to go to college. You need to go get a job and you need to find your own place and be on your own. And my parents are incredibly supportive. And honestly, I think that's why I work so hard, is because like they didn't let me just skate by. Like, I worked for everything I have.
Right.
And so they did that. And I was working at the Four Seasons Hotel, a job that my dad helped me get, by the way, because my dad was working at the Four Seasons. Okay, Steve. And so I got a job working as the hostess in the restaurant at the top of the Four Seasons. And I met a couple of guys that were in hip hop that also worked at the restaurant. And so we would just like go on our break and they would be like rapping and I would be singing with them and all this stuff. And then, I was like, guys, if you guys need somebody to sing on your hooks for free, like, I got you. I'll do it.
You just volunteered.
That's it. Like, hey, I was like, I'll do it for free.
I'll get in the booth. Let's go.
100%. Like, I just I loved music so much and I wanted to be integrated in like that culture so badly that I was like, I'll do anything. I don't care. Like, where are we going? Yeah. And so I, was in like every closet studio booth in every apartment in St. Louis for the first year, just recording for free. And my name kind of got passed around from artist to artist to artist to artist. It was like, she'll do this shit for free and she sounds really good. So
like, she's cheap and she's good.
Right.
Like, you're the hot ticket.
Right. And Let's so go. I wasn't turning down anybody's songs. Like, I wasn't listening to songs being like, oh, this is whack. I was just like, sure, you got it. No problem. And so my parents had no idea where I was ever. They just thought I was working late.
Love that.
And meanwhile, I'd be in like some like seedy apartment.
Sorry, in Mom, St. Louis, the restaurant shift's going way later than I thought.
Putting a hook down. And so that is how I ended up meeting one person. They introduced me to another person, to another person, to another person. And I ended up working with Nelly and working with Huey.
You worked with Nelly?
Yeah, for a very brief
That's
moment.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Ride with me. Like that guy, Nelly.
That guy, yeah. Like, so I used to go to his studio. He has a studio in St. Louis, in St. Charles. I wonder if it's still there, but that's where Dirty Entertainment was. And so we used to go to the Dirty studio and I would actually clock out. So at this time, so fast forward. So I was working at the Four Seasons when I met all these guys. I continue to do this. I continue to do that. And then I end up like, meeting all these guys and working my way up to like the bigger rappers. Right. And then by this time I am bartending at another restaurant. And so I would get off of work and I would clock out probably at like 3 a.m. And I would drive to St. Charles and be in the studio, in Nelly's studio, until like 7 a.m. And then I would drive home and sleep for like an hour and then go back to work.
That's unbelievable.
And I was just talking to somebody about this yesterday. It was Ray. Shout out Ray. We love you.
Shout out Ray if you listen to the pod.
Instagram at @bad@mathray. Right. But I was actually talking to Ray about it when we were on the road yesterday. I was like, man, it's so different than Nashville and how people work in Nashville, like being in hip hop, or at least it was back then.
How is it different than
we
Nashville?
would be in the studio till 7 o'clock in the morning, 8 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, you mean like a timing thing? They just go
like there was no like let's write and we do like a 4-hour block. Like it was like we get in the studio when we clock out from work and everybody just meets up and then we are there until we can't keep our eyes open anymore. And we'll write 3 songs or we'll cut 3 songs or whatever. I mean, it's like when one song is done, we just continue to work until someone's like, y'all, I got to call it a night.
That's
and the vibe was so sick. It was just like
Were you intimidated, like being in the studio with Nelly?
100%.
Yeah,
100%.
like if I mess this up.
There is a picture on the internet of me asleep. So it was like Nelly is here, and then it was like this guy Joey that I used to hang out with, and Doughboy. It was like a couple other artists, like my friends, and his like crew of people. And then there's just me like in a flannel shirt like this, asleep behind everybody as they're like still working, because it was probably 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning at that point, and I had worked all night.
You were trying to get a power nap.
But that's what it was like.
That's unbelievable. So okay, so you're doing this. When working with Nelly or somebody like that, like what's the aspiration there? Were you trying to like make it on their records? Were you
yeah, I mean, that
hey,
was
like any way to get my name out there, right? Like, cause a lot of those songs, I mean, they're not country at all. So you're just you're doing your own thing.
At that point I didn't even know who I was as an artist at that point, Chris. Like I had no idea who I was. I was trying to figure it out. So I was just like, I'm going to do whatever. Right. And so, I mean, at that point, like anytime that somebody was going to the studio with Nelly, like I just went. I was just like, yeah, let's go. And then I would, if they needed a female vocal, they'd ask me to put a female vocal down. And that was what I needed. That was what I wanted. You know, it never came into like me and Nelly doing a song together or anything, or me and Huey doing a song together, or Chingy. But like, it was just the opportunity to be in the room with those guys and to see how they work. I learned so much in that time of my life, so much about grinding it out, so much about like that mentality of like no sleep, no play, like all work, you know? And I feel like it's what made me like who I am today.
I will say, like, I know so many artists and creatives in Nashville, and like your work ethic is amazing, because there's so many people that get into a writer's room and they write one song a week, and then they like hang out and they party, they go down to Broadway. And it's like, you understand what it takes to make it. And I know that from as long as you've been in the business, the amount of shows. I mean, you literally were playing with Jordan Davis last night, and now you're sitting in here doing a podcast with me. Like, you do not have to be here, and it's super cool. But I guess like my question is, right, so you work with Nelly, and then eventually like do they offer you a deal? Like how, like what, like
no,
how
so,
does like
so all of that gets around to the owner of the independent record label that I ended up signing with, and it was called Network Entertainment. Yeah. And I ended up signing with Network. I did 2 singles with them. And honestly, by the second single that we ended up putting out, we did a radio tour, and the single did pretty good. Like it was like #1 on New Music Weekly's Hot 100, and like did really, really well. The first single, and honestly, by the second one, I was just like, I'm not being myself. Like this is not it. I'm like writing country songs, and they're being produced as R&B songs. And I just clearly knew that. I just started to come into who I actually am. I grew up on country music. You know, it's all my friends listen to. I mean, we listened to Nelly, and we listened to, you know, hip hop, and like, I loved Lil Wayne. You know what I mean? Right. Like everything. We also listened to pop radio, and just like, you know, everything that was popping on there. That's gotta be such a weird
feeling, like your songs charting and like being heard by, you know, the world, and you're like, this isn't even me.
Yeah, I felt so off. Like I just didn't feel like I was being myself, and I kept wondering why I was receiving these songs back, like these demos of these songs I was working on, and I hated them. I did not like them at all. And then I just realized it was because I wasn't being myself. Yeah. And so then I remember the day I left the label, and I was working at a bar, and we met at the Mexican restaurant across the street from the bar, because I had to clock in like 30 minutes later. And I remember like the week before, I had told him, I can't do this whole like sit and wait thing that you keep telling me to do. Like I need to be working. Like I came off of this like hip hop grind mentality where we were in the studio every single day. Like I wasn't sleeping more than 2 hours a night. Yeah. And like we were grinding it out. And now you're just telling me to like sit and wait. And I just can't do that. And so I was like, I want to be posting videos on social media. Like I want to be posting videos on Facebook. Why won't you let me do this? Right. And he's like, you don't need to be posting cover songs. You're this, you're that. Meanwhile, I was no one knew who I was. Like I was like, I think I had like 6,000 followers on social media, like on Facebook at this point. Like he was like, it was all about like the look of it all. You know, like we would like fly first class, and like, but meanwhile, it was like my money being spent. Right. Do you know what I mean? I think it was 2015, maybe. And I had to clock into my shift at work, and I sat across the street at the Mexican restaurant. And I was like, I've got to leave. Like, you're not letting me do anything. I feel like I'm just like stuck here recording music I don't want to record, and never going to see a dime of it because the money keeps getting spent on things that don't matter. And I've just got to leave, and I cried. I remember like sitting in the bathtub that night when I got off of work and just bawling my eyes out thinking like, did I just make a horrible decision? And it ended up being exactly what I needed to do. And I think it was like the next week that I started sitting on my stairs recording videos on Facebook.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's such a high stakes moment. Like, like, okay, so you leave the job, you start posting, like, when does it pop immediately? Or like,
you want to know what's funny? I just thought about this the other day. I completely forgot. But my first viral video that I ever had was If You're Reading This by Tim McGraw.
Really? Mm-hmm. That's such a full circle moment because obviously, you're just coming off this Tim tour. Yeah. That was your first viral. My
first viral video, I would say it was probably 2014 or 15.
So it was on Facebook?
Yes.
Okay. So you upload this video on Facebook and you wake up the next day.
We used to do these, Chris. We used to do these like 3 times a week or 4 times a week. I used to post one like 4 times a week where I would have this. I hired a guitar player, and he would just sit at the stairs, and we would sit on the staircase of my parents' house. I moved back in with my parents at this point.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't afford to live by myself anymore because I left the label, and we're like sitting there on the stairs, and we would just sing these songs and post them. And of course, a couple of times it was just like, oh my gosh, this one got 3,000 views. Like, that's awesome.
That's insane. What I mean? Yeah, exactly.
And then the Tim McGraw one, I think, was my first one. It hit like 2 million, 3 million. I think now it's like 4 or 5
That's
million.
A huge jump though, from like 3,000 to 2 million. Yeah. Were people sharing it? Like what was?
And then after that, it just went, and then
to the moon.
It was one viral video after the next, after the next, after the next. And then by 2016, that's when I did Jolene.
And Jolene was the one that, how many views is that at now?
70 million, I think, on Facebook.
Facebook alone. That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you post Jolene, it does 70 million views. Like, are you just like, all right, I've made it. Like, I can retire. Like, I'm on top of the world. Or like, what? Like, where do you go from 70 million views?
Well, I didn't have a team. I didn't have anybody behind me, and so my dad like kind of became my manager for a little bit, and he just started booking me shows. We started booking shows. I got on the road and just drove myself all over the country, losing money like crazy. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't know what I was doing, so I was just like, I just want to play. And they weren't paying me anything for real.
That's exposure, right?
Yeah. And I was just like, I just want to go see people. And I would go and play these cover shows because I barely had any original music out. Yeah. And so, that was such a crazy time in my life. It's so weird to think about it. That's
unbelievable. Okay. So so you're doing that, you're starting to see some virality, right? Jolene happens and you're playing these cover shows and then, fast forward. And of course, your story, I feel like the past few years has been heavily rooted in TikTok and another platform, all right, comes to the table. And like, I felt like you were pretty early to get on TikTok compared to, I think, a lot of people in Nashville, or at least like in the country music scene. But
I would say,
what inspired, like, how'd you hear about TikTok when it started?
So after Jolene went viral in 2016, I got the call to be on West Side in 2017, and did the audition, went out, did the show.
That's right. You did the whole show. You were out in LA, right?
I did a Netflix original series called West Side, and I lived in LA for 2 years.
How was that?
Shoot the show. It was incredible.
Do you like LA?
I love it. And Indy loves it too. He did not want to leave. He was so upset we had to leave. And I was like, we have to go to Nashville.
That's amazing. I feel like some people love LA, some people hate LA.
I loved it. But to be completely honest, like, once the show was, this is what I always say. The version of LA that I got to see was very different from the version of LA that I got to see after the show was over. So, when you're on a Netflix show, like, they always had like parties, and it was like,
you're doing it. Yeah.
A whole like glitz and glammy lifestyle that we were living, that when the show is done, I was like, this isn't as cool when you're not like, going to like fancy schmancy parties all the time. And, it just wasn't, and it's very expensive. And when you're not getting the checks anymore, like when the show was over, like the checks stopped. So then I went and had to get, okay. So after the show ended and we didn't get a second season of West Side, I went and worked at a bar for the remainder of my time living in LA.
That blows my mind that you go from like Netflix TV show to working at a bar.
So you want to know something? I was driving down not Hollywood Boulevard, Sunset Boulevard.
Yeah.
I was driving down Sunset Boulevard, putting applications in while my billboard for West Side was getting taken down. I drove past my billboard getting taken down while I was putting in applications at bars.
That's unbelievable.
I mean, it was the craziest thing. I was just on TRL like the month before, and doing like segments for GMA, and it was nuts. It was like a switch like that. It was
all just because the season didn't get renewed.
And I mean, it ran its course. It was done.
Yeah.
I think it was shortly after that. I mean, we were like in New York doing all the press. We were all over. Like I remember us walking. We were walking as a cast in Times Square, and we just looked up and I'm not kidding. We had like 7 billboards in Times Square. Really? It was just our faces just lit up. And then we had personal face billboards in Times Square. It was the craziest thing I've ever experienced in my life. And then a month later, I had a mop in my hand,
Yeah. So it just blows my mind. Like you're on a Times Square billboard. The show clearly is getting some attention. I know it's not renewed, but like there weren't other opportunities that came knocking at your door from that. Like, did you even think like, oh, like I could be an actress, or were you still like, no, like music's my lane? I mean, like,
Chris, it was a really strange time for all of us as a cast, because we were told, that we were this big thing. Like this was the most funded show of the year for Netflix. I mean, it was massive, and it was supposed to be huge, and then it just wasn't. And that's just how it works, And so we were built up, all of this suspension, right? And we worked with the best of the best. I mean, we got to work with Diane Warren, and we got to work with Max Martin, and we got to work. I mean, I wrote, songs with Josh Osborne and Shea McAnally, and like it. And then just for it to all just go away. It was like just as quickly as it was there, it didn't do what Netflix thought it was going to do. And they can't just continue to pour money into something if it's just not working. And so they didn't pull it. It's still on the platform, but they didn't renew us for a second season. And so it was, I believe, over Thanksgiving time that we were started to hear that it wasn't doing what they wanted it to do. And then I think it was like a couple months later that I lost my record deal.
Do you think that like this is an example of like, and we live in a time where like social media is like so prevalent, right? TV shows, there's so many concepts happening. Like, just think about how fragile the industry is, right? Like, all right, you go from something that's millions of dollars are being dumped into, and you think like you're going to be on top of the moon, and then it just doesn't work. And it's like, okay, like what do we do? I mean, like, that has to scare you, right?
I was terrified. I was terrified. When it all just went away, I don't think I went through a really, really dark time. I was like, could barely get out of bed. And, my checks went away. I couldn't pay my bills. I was living in a 400 square foot studio apartment in Los Angeles. That was $3,000 a month.
Yeah.
And writing songs in the bathtub because Indy was working, the night shift. So he would sleep during the day, and I would just like sit in the bathtub with my guitar and write songs and put like towels underneath the door. And that was like my only time to myself.
Yourself. Yeah.
And yeah, it was tough. It was really, really dark. And I just said, that's it. I'm going to work my butt off at this bar, until my lease is up. And that's what I did. And then as soon as my lease was up, and I worked, I went, met a whole bunch of musicians, and I did some, writing for other artists, and wrote a bunch of pop songs.
Right.
It was really cool. I was like unhinged because at that point I felt like I had just lost everything. And so I had nothing to lose. And so I just went and did a bunch of top line stuff for other artists and got some cuts, and it was cool.
I guess that's the silver lining of it, is like when you lose everything, you're like, well, screw it. I'm here. Like right back to what you were talking about with like meeting Nelly. You're like, shit, I'll sing the song. I'll write with you. I'll do whatever. Right. Because you're just 100%. Trying to get yourself back into the door.
Yeah.
When did you decide, all right, LA's been great, I need to move?
Well, I mean, I wanted to be gone right when the show got, right when we weren't getting a second season. I wanted to leave then, but I couldn't. I had a lease. So when my checks were gone, I wanted to leave right then and go back home, but I couldn't. So like, all right, I got a job at one of the oldest bars in Burbank, California. It's called Tin Horn Flats. Shout out to Tin Horn Flats.
Hey.
It has saloon doors.
Oh, really?
And
that's amazing.
It's actually like, it's been there long enough that it doesn't like, it is like exempt from the sidewalk codes. So it's like right on the street. It's just like a really cool, like historic bar.
I'm going to check it out. And that's amazing.
Yeah, it's dope. And so they gave me a job and I worked there, and every single day, everybody that sat down, I would make a conversation with them and then end up telling them what I did. Mm-hmm. And I made myself cards, like with my social media stuff on them and my name and West Side and all this stuff on them. And I would make sure everybody left knowing what I did. And that's kind of how I got through LA, being like, I'm going to work to pay my bills so I can get out of here and get to Nashville. And then,
but you're still so smart. I mean, you're handing out your business cards. You're making sure the contacts
know what I actually do, right?
Yeah.
And so we did that until we ended up moving in, I believe it was November or something, January, November. We ended up going back to St. Louis. And so what I told Indiana, my husband, is I said, okay, look, you uprooted your whole life to move to LA for me, for this show. And now you've just had to move again and leave another job. So I'm not going to make you move to Nashville and find another job. We went back home and I said, I'll commute back and forth to Nashville and let you stay here and work. And until we figure something out. So
at this point,
and that's when I met you.
That's when we met. Mm-hmm. Okay. So at that point, cause I remember this, I'd be like, hey, like, and this was during COVID, right? When we, or the back half of COVID into like, we start collaborating together and you start meeting some other artists in town. And I remember I'd text and be like, hey, like we're shooting, a video tomorrow. And you'd be like, okay, great. Like I'll just get up at 4 a.m. and be able to drive from St. Louis down to Nashville to be there for the shoot all day. Right. At this point, I don't think you guys had a place here. So you were like crashing with friends or like.
No, I was just couch surfing.
Surfing. Right. Mm-hmm. And like 2 days later, you're like, all right, I'm going back to, the husband and, and playing shows back home.
Yes.
And I think that's the part that fascinates me about you and about people in Nashville, and not enough people realize this, but like it takes so much sacrifice and so much time and effort. Like you're literally not sleeping, coming here just to make a few videos, hoping that maybe they catch some steam while going back and still playing shows in your hometown, because that's the only way you can pay rent, right? So it's like,
and I mean, and that was the thing too, is everybody was like, well, why don't you go to Nashville and play on Broadway? And I was like, I make more money in my hometown.
Isn't that weird?
That was it. I mean, the pay is higher, much higher, because there's less of me there. Right. You know what I mean? There's less of us there. Like we stand out when we go home, right?
That's what people forget. Like you're coming, you're big fish, small pond. You come to Nashville, everyone can sing. And also,
and everyone's fighting for those gigs.
They're fighting for the gigs. And there's also this myth that like, like when you play on Broadway, like you're going to be discovered, you're going to be some superstar. It's like, all right, I feel like at this point people know that like that's kind of gone, because it's like there's 100 bars down there, and also you're playing to make a couple $100 that you're then going to use to pay your rent. Where do you have the time to write, record music, do like what all of us are trying to do in Nashville, on top of that? And so I think a lot of people just forget about how much sacrifice and how tough it is.
It is. It's really tough. And so when I came back, I said, at the time that everything was falling apart with West Side and we were still putting on this front like everything was great, right? All of us were. Like we were all in denial. Like nobody wanted to admit that this thing that we had worked so hard on for 2 years. We'd shoot 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. Most of the time we were working 7 days a week. It was insane.
How many cups of coffee a day were you having?
It was nonstop. It was crazy. Yeah. And we worked so hard on this project, and we emotionally and physically drained ourselves. And for it to not work out was really, really hard. And so we were all kind of in denial. We were still posting about it. And like, we were still trying to get it. Like, we really believed that we were going to be able to, you know, get it off the ground. And so at this time, my lease is up. I moved back, but you know, I just lost my record deal and I was pitching songs to them that they didn't want to cut, which is fine. You know, like I'm not bitter towards that label one bit that they didn't want to cut these songs. Like, that's fine. But I did take them with me and I did release them on my own, and they did really well. So like,
that's awesome. Be like, hey, you didn't want me to cut these songs, and guess what?
Like,
I did it anyway.
Like, I'm not bitter at you guys for not wanting to cut them, but
have you heard from your label since you put them out? That label, the label that dropped you, a different.
Yes, a different. How do I say this? Like, there's like an LA and a Nashville.
A different office. Yes,
I heard from the Nashville.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And were they like, what they say? Like, good for you?
Yeah. I mean, they liked the songs, which was, you know, cool to hear.
That's amazing.
Because, you know, that was like, it kind of brings me back to what you originally asked about, which was TikTok. And so when I left the label, I was like, I am nose to the grindstone writing songs right now. Like, that is it. That is absolutely it. It's like, I forgot about social media for a while and I just wrote. And I was doing Zoom writes from LA with people in Nashville, simply from finding them on Instagram and DMing them and be like, hey, like, I was just on this Netflix show. Like, that's how I would try to get people to take me seriously, to want to write with me. And then I would get on a Zoom and I would write with them in Nashville. And so we wrote a few songs that I like really, really loved. So then I would fly out to Nashville and cut those songs. And then when I decided to move back, that was what I was doing. And it must have been, man, I think it was like a month that I had left LA that I got in the write with Tana Matson and Ryan Robinette. And I wrote, I Kinda Don't. And so in that write is when Ryan was like, hey, have you guys heard of this app called TikTok? And I was like, yeah, it's a kids app. Like, children are just dancing on this app. Like, it would be weird if we got on this, right? And he was like, no, like, there are artists that are getting on this and they're getting like a lot of traction. He pulled up one of his friends' videos and like the algorithm was just, it was the Wild West. Like, that's what me and Nick call it. Like, it was the Wild West on TikTok back then. You could, it was unhinged. Like, there was no marketing. There was no ads. There was no pay for this and boost this and that. There was none of that. Like, it was so organic. Yeah. And I said, whatever. I mean, at this point, from hearing this interview, you guys know I'll try anything. So I was like,
that's so cool because I feel like so many people open up TikTok and they're like, all right, I'm not going to dance or I'm not going to do the whole thirst trap thing. Like, see you later. Well, and you were like, shit, I'm going to post music on here.
This is something that I want to ask you because I don't talk to.
The tables have turned.
I do. Like, I want to know what you think about this because, like, do you ever get kind of like snubbed from people for the way that we are coming up in the music business? Like, do you ever feel this like weird, like, oh yeah, you're the guy from TikTok?
I think at first it got to my head. I think like for some reason there was.
But you have experienced it though.
Yes, 100%. Okay, yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think right, like people were like, oh, they're just a TikTok artist, which for whatever reason I think seemed to meant that their music was not as credible as other people. And I think that's because the app, like as you mentioned, was so Wild West that like some people were putting out music. There were as many good songs on TikTok as there were bad songs. In fact, there maybe were more bad songs, good songs. So I get it, right? But that's also an unfair representation to claim that everybody on that app for doing what they're trying to do, like you are and making in the music industry, is like not credible. And I don't know. I think also, and this is my opinion, I think there's a lot of jealousy.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, nothing's really cool until it works. And then people say it's cool, right? So like
100%.
There, and you hear stories, like Luke Combs got turned down by a bunch of record labels. Morgan Wallen was on The Voice and like got off The Voice. I'm sure there's many examples, obviously in the pop world as well. But it's like, all right, people weren't in and sold on them until they had that hit and they had that song. And so I think there was a lot of that too going on when it first started, and particularly in your case, right? Like you were one of the first to really pop on the platform, and it's been amazing to watch what that's done for your career. And it still blows my mind that people would be like, oh, it
still happens to me, Chris. I mean, it still
happens. People
happens.
still make fun of you for being a TikTok artist.
Well, I mean, it's I don't know if I would say like they full blown make fun of me, because I feel it. You know what I'm saying? Like it's oh yeah, you're the coffee girl. It's that. It's very just like, oh yeah, you're the coffee girl, right? Like that's what I get all the time. And I'm just like, yeah. And I was just, you know me, like, I'm like, whatever. Like, I'm just going to laugh about it and whatever. Right. If you want to be rude, like, that's fine. I'm not going to be rude. Like, I mean, but I have people all the time that are like super rude to me about like how I kind of got the following that I did. And I think part of it's jealousy. I do. I agree with you on that. I also think that jealousy also comes from me just being willing to do what they're not willing to do.
Right. Your threshold is maybe different than.
Right. Like not everybody has the personality to just say, let's try this, without being like, well, what are people going to think? You know, like the coffee covers was so organic. First of all, like I think that, and I was just saying this in an interview earlier today, like this, people forget that my first viral video is not a coffee video, it's an original song. Like my first viral video was I Kinda Don't. And at that time, Priscilla Block was like one of the only independent artists. I know she was the only independent artist at that time that was getting the #1 spot on the iTunes chart. And everybody was like, what is happening? Right. And so I was like, I had like watched her kind of promote this song and this pandemonium that was like coming from TikTok and everybody watching her create this and being able to help her create this. And I was just like, This is really cool. And this is a moment. Like this is going to be something. We are going to be able to continue to promote our music direct to the consumer. This is awesome. I have to do this. So I put I Kinda Don't up on TikTok. Yeah. And I told my story about how I ended up leaving my record deal because we just weren't seeing eye to eye on what I should cut and who I should be. And they blew it up. And I was I was right after Priscilla. I think it was like 2 weeks later that I Kinda Don't was #1 on iTunes. And since at that time, nobody was doing that. So the record labels just came pouring in. And, we did all the chats, had all the talks. And I promised myself after I left my second record deal that I was not going to sign another deal unless it was the deal for me. And so we didn't take any of those deals.
That's something that I wanted to ask you was you have a #1 song on iTunes. You have millions of followers on socials. I'm sure record labels are knocking at your door and you still decide to stay independent. Mm-hmm. Why? I think there's a lot of like misconception about me being proud of being an independent artist. And I think that I have definitely turned off some people for waving my independent flag as high as I have. And I'm okay with that because I truly think that the right opportunity, the right label, the right teammate, the right partner is going to come along and they're just going to get it. They're going to understand why I did what I did, why I held on to my creative freedom for as long as I did, why I decide to release songs the way I decide to release songs, in what order, and what my strategies are. Mm-hmm. They're going to understand it all. They're going to understand my work ethic and my passion for this. And at that time, I'll sign a deal. But until then, why? Do you know how many, Chris, do you know how many label meetings I have sat in? And after we're done talking, they don't know what they have to offer me that I don't already have, other than country radio. That's it. Okay. And then my follow-up to that is, do you think that TikTok and social media and where we're at now has equaled the playing field for everyone?
Equaled? No. I don't think we're equaled right now, in country music anyways. I think it's definitely becoming equal in the pop world. I think that, us as a genre, we definitely like to do things the more old school way. And I think that we are a little bit behind as far as innovation goes. And it's probably going to stay that way for a little bit just because of the nature of it all. But I think that we are definitely able to be successful now without having to sign. Mm-hmm. We still have country radio, which is huge in our genre. Radio is still huge in our genre. For pop, it's not as much of a like breaker,
right,
for pop music. Everybody's streaming pop music like crazy. And they're streaming country music as well. I think that they said this was the biggest year streaming for country music this year.
That wouldn't surprise me.
Prior to previous years, compared to pop music, which pop music is just like streamed like crazy, and then country was always kind of lagging behind because people still listen to the radio. Right. But I think that like I said, there are still a lot of things that a label can offer me. But if I'm sitting in a room and they don't know what those things are, then it's not. But I know what they are, then we're not on the same page.
Do you think most labels in Nashville right now are kind of going like, oh shit, we don't know what to do?
Well,
because
I mean,
of this.
I think you do hear a lot about some of the labels thinking that a viral TikTok is a marketing plan, when you and I both know that we have no control over that.
Right.
But also, do you know how many incredible songs I hear on TikTok? And then I look down and it has like 200 likes on it. And I'm like, oh my God, this song is incredible. And then I go on their page and they've been trying super, super hard and it's maybe gotten like 50,000 views at the most. And I'm like, how is this not huge?
Right.
Like, we have no control over that algorithm and what it decides to pick up and what fans it decides to reach. That's the thing, is like, you could put out a banger pop country crossover song and it could go to like Hank Williams, Waylon Jennings fans, and they're not going to like it.
Right.
But you have no control over that audience being the first audience that sees that and decides to click like or not in order to advance you in the algorithm. It's not precise enough for anybody to call it a marketing plan. That's just my opinion.
Does it scare you that the way that we're consuming content and music right now so rapidly and as randomized in a sense, right? I know there's an algorithm behind this, but to your point, like, does it scare you that some music is hitting and growing and being represented that maybe is leaving other great forms of art and storytelling behind?
I mean, it scares me every single time I go to release a song. I'm just terrified. I'm just terrified because you don't know what's going to hit.
Let me ask you this. When you put out music, how much of it are you basing off of, this is the response that TikTok or social media gave me, versus I actually really, really fucking love this song and I want to put it out?
0. I don't write songs for TikTok.
You just write songs for yourself.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, I use TikTok as a tool, but I have never sat down and been like, this is a great hook, or this is a great hook, and this is a TikTok sound. This will 100% blow up as a TikTok sound. I don't write songs like that. And have I thought sometimes that maybe I should write a couple of songs like that?
Right.
Yeah, because I think it would help a lot, but
well, I know people, and I'm sure you know people that do that.
Right.
And they say, oh, I'm going to write a song because this is in right now. I'm going to get my quick moment of virality. It's going to happen. I'm going to make a quick buck and I'm going to run away. And it's going to be great. But I mean, at some point, isn't your artistry jeopardized by that?
I think so, 100%. Well, I see people, and I'm sure you have too, I see people doing things that are, in my opinion, off brand all the time just to make it a TikTok moment. And then I'm like, well, isn't everyone getting confused on who you are now? Because I think that it's very easy to be who you think everybody wants you to be. And I did that for a long time because everybody was like, I love your voice because it's reminiscent of Dolly Parton and it's very sweet and you've got that quick vibrato and I love Alison Krauss and Leanne Womack, and you remind me of those girls. And I leaned so heavy into that when I started to create this record that I'm putting out at the end of the year, as much as I am like so obsessed with this music, I love it so much. And I can't wait for everybody to hear it. I was terrified. I'm sure that I've told Nick a couple of times, like after I wrote this song, I was like, I can't put this out.
Yeah.
And he's like, it's a banger. Like, why not? And I was like, because everybody's going to look at me and be like, this isn't you. This isn't who you are. And he's like, well, is it you? And I'm like, yeah, it's 100% me. And I love it. Mm-hmm. You know? And I had to be real with myself and stop saying, you don't have to be the girl that sounds like Dolly Parton all the time. You don't have to be the girl that sounds like you're super throwback 90s country all the time. Like, I am that some days. Some days I'm blasting 90s country. Some days I'm blasting Silverstein and the Used. And you know what I mean? Like, like it's okay.
Right.
It's okay for me to release songs that are more pop leaning. And I never thought that I was ever going to be okay with that. Yeah. But I woke up one morning and I was like, I am obsessed with this song, and who cares if it's pop leaning? It's me.
That's amazing.
And so I can't wait for everybody to hear it.
I'm so excited to hear music.
Really excited.
Can I, is there anything unreleased that like I can hear after this?
Oh,
like,
absolutely.
All right, perfect.
I've got a few ones. I've got a few songs.
That's amazing.
That I'm really excited for you to hear.
Okay, I have a question for you.
Okay.
You do these coffee covers, right?
Right.
And, you know, they start taking off for you. And I think the cool part is it leads to, you know, have a platform now. You can share your music and you can tour and you can do all this stuff, but you continue to upload these coffee covers. Why?
Because it is natural for me. It's very natural. Like the coffee covers, it was so organic how it happened. Mm-hmm. Somebody literally just responded to me, and I had me standing there. I think I had like avocado toast, and I was like singing a Jody Messina song, and I had a big mason jar full of coffee because it's actually how I make my coffee and what I drink every morning. And they were like, what is in that jar? And I just responded, and I made it, and I sang. It was the easiest, most organic thing. It wasn't a discussion between, you know, me and Nick. It wasn't a discussion between me and Beth. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, guys, like this could be a thing. Everybody's making coffee. You know what I mean? It was just so, the music was playing because that's what I listened to in the morning.
Right.
And so I continue to upload. Well, for a minute, I remember when these were really going viral because we played the listening room. Mm-hmm. Was it the list? Yeah. We all played the listening room with 615.
Yep.
And everybody was like, oh my gosh, what is this coffee thing you've been doing on TikTok? And I'm like, dude, I don't know, but it's like going nuts. And I remember having that first initial conversation with you guys. And after that, I put a lot of pressure on myself to upload those every day because it was like the only thing that was moving my page.
Right. Did it start to become work?
Yes. 100%.
And it was tedious and 100%. and you would wake up. So like, because I think,
you know, Chris, like some days you wake up and like your voice isn't there all the way, you know, like some days you wake up and you've been singing for 3 days, or maybe you drank the night before, or like, you know, alcohol is like really bad for your voice. Like I could literally have a beer the night before and I'm raspy the next day. Yeah. You know, so like maybe I had like a couple of beers at dinner the night before and my voice is like raspy and I can't just wake up that next morning and sound good. Right. So then I'm like having to redo it over and over. And I'm like actually remaking my coffee for videos in the morning. And then it was just kind of like, you know, I stopped enjoying it and it stopped being organic. And so that's why I slowed down on them for a little bit.
Yeah. I noticed that you took some time off. Do you, and now you're doing them again.
And now I do them again because.
Do you feel like it's like you're back to enjoying it? And
yeah, because I stopped. It's not like I'm just making coffee in the morning. Right. That's why I don't put a bunch of stuff in it. I'm just like, I put my coffee in my protein shake and like, that's my breakfast.
See, that's the biggest thing that like, I think is so funny is like, how many people have come up to you and been like, you know, other musicians, and they're like, Alexandra, like you have it, you know how the social media thing works. Like, can you help me? Like, I don't know what to do. Like, I wake up every day and I think for hours and hours on end about like what kind of content and like brand I need to project to the world. And it's like, no, like you're just doing what you love. Like, yo, I get up and I have a cup of coffee and I happen to sing music in the morning that's on like my kitchen counter. It's not that much work, right?
No, it's like just be yourself. That's the only thing that I tell those people is be yourself and post. Post. Like, I mean, there were so many days when I keep referencing Nick because he's sitting on the other side and like,
oh, Nick, shout out Nick.
Hey, Nick. Nick and I have been working together for a really long time, and Nick helps me out with socials, and especially since, you know, like I really love to keep in touch with everybody on social media and stuff. And so Nick monitors everything and is like, hey, like it's so-and-so's birthday. And like, I'll go on and be like, hey, happy birthday. You know, like he's just really helped me keep up with everything. And so I called him. There was a couple of times when I would call him and I would be like, I don't know what song to sing, or my voice doesn't sound good today. And I can't make a singing video today because my voice is gone or something, you know? And he'd be just like, okay, so post something else, you know, like just post, just be consistent, just be yourself and just show your fans who you are. You don't have to sing every minute of every day. They like you for who you are too, right? You know? And so like, it was really hard for me to get into that. Like I just posted a video yesterday on Facebook of me just like shooting hoops at faster horses. Like I just had to.
She's a softball player and a basketball player.
I had to just like stop putting so much pressure on myself and just let myself know that like, I also am just a real person who lives like a real life, and people like to see that too.
I think that's cool. And I think I'm glad that you show it. One question I have for you. So I listen to a lot of Gary Vee. Okay. It's my thing, right?
We love Gary
Vee, right?
We love Gary Vee.
Here's the thing. Gary Vee says in 2022, he goes, there's never a thing as too much content, right? Do you stand by that? Do you think you can oversaturate with content?
No, I don't. I don't think you can. I think that you can wear out a certain piece of content. So like the coffee covers, if that was all I was posting nonstop every single day, which at one point it was like I would wake up in the morning, I'd make a coffee cover, and then the next day I'd do another one. There are times when I like scroll all the way down on my TikTok and it's all coffee covers. That's it. I didn't make another single piece of content in between. And I think that I was oversaturating at that point with that one piece of content. Right. And so I do like, I'll make a coffee whenever I wake up and I want to have a cup of coffee and like my protein shake. I will, like this morning was my first one I did in like 2 weeks because this was the first day that I woke up and had my coffee and my protein. And so I'm just trying to keep it organic. And then, you know, like we'll do things. Nick helps me out a lot because he'll just and so does Ray. Ray's my videographer. He'll like walk up and just ask me questions or ask me to sing things. Or like Nick the other day when we were driving on the drive, just like turned his camera on by himself and was like, sing me a song with the letter 2 in it, or with the number 2 in it. Sing me a song that's about baseball. Sing me a song, you know, and that video got 1 million views. And like, they helped me out with that, with keeping things consistent. Sure. But like organic. I'm not like, hey, Nick, walk up to me and ask me all these questions, or like walk up to me in 5 seconds, Ray, and tell me to sing when you say nothing at all. You know what I mean? It's, they get it and they help me with that.
There's so much of that content online where like, you all know, and then you go in the comment section and you go like, oh my God, like this is so cringe. It was so forced, right? And I feel like so many people are doing that. There's a big thing, I think, online right now of like, you know, copycats and like people stealing other people's content.
There's another coffee girl.
Yeah.
Have you seen her?
I'm sure there's another coffee girl. Yeah.
She's like big. She's got like 3 million followers.
Really? So you guys are going like neck and neck right now.
Well, like the thing is people tag me every single day in her videos and they're like, you're copying off Alexandra K. And I'm like,
do you guys have beef?
No, I love her. I think she's so incredibly talented. She's a pop singer. If I showed you her, you have seen her before. She's got a really raspy, beautiful voice. Like it is insane. But she was just on America's Got Talent. And I think they like called her the coffee girl on there. And everybody was like, Alexandra K.
I saw that girl. Wait. What's her name?
I don't remember.
Oh my God. Hold on. I'm going to look this up right now. If I type into Google coffee girl TikTok, I wonder if she pops up or you. This is juicy.
Oh, my God.
Here we go. Oh my God. Coffee girl TikTok. Let's see. Wait, is her name Kristen?
Oh gosh.
Kristen Cruz? No, this is crazy. Okay,
Is there another one?
No. There's not.
Okay.
You're good. It's just you and her. But I typed in Coffee Girl TikTok, and she's the first thing that pops up, and you're the second thing that pops up. I don't know who has more views. That I'm going to dig into. Toe to toe, though. Toe to toe. If it was you and her, who's the coffee queen of TikTok? Are you the coffee queen of TikTok?
I mean, I started it.
Let's go.
I started it, but I do think she's got an incredible voice. Like, I watch her videos all the time. But I think it's funny that people will tag me. They'll be like, you're copying off her. And I think it's so flattering. Like, I think it's so cool that somebody like really liked the piece of content that I, started creating and that they wanted to do too. I think that's really cool.
It is cool. You're setting a trend. And you know what?
So how I feel is I feel like if people get too offended that their ideas are getting stolen, then I don't think that they really have enough belief in themselves to come up with better ideas.
Right. Yeah, just come up with a better idea.
I mean, I think that like we're creatives. That's our job.
You're doing coffee covers now. You're gonna do
You'll have something
You're gonna
else.
do smoothie covers next week. We're gonna do milkshakes.
I was the Jolene girl for how many years? I mean, forever. I was the Jolene girl, and then I was the coffee girl, and then I'll be something else.
What about okay, so this girl, right? This other coffee girl on TikTok, her name's Kristen Cruz. What do you think about an Alexander K, Kristen Cruz coffee collab?
Oh wait, we should really
do you think that would I think that could
Nick, will you remind me to DM her? Oh my gosh, we have to get the two coffee girls together.
Digital man Nick sliding into her DMs
Nick,
right now.
Into her DMs.
Alexander K, Kristen Cruz, coffee girl cover coming to you soon. If it happens, this is when it originated.
We'll have her come to 615 House. We should do it there.
Oh my God, we should totally make that happen. This is amazing. All right, look, we got to wrap this thing up. Here's the best part about this. This podcast was supposed to be like 30 minutes and it's already been like an hour because I'm just having so much fun talking to you. It's amazing. Okay. We do this thing. We're doing hot takes. All right. Don't think, just speak.
Okay. Got it.
Super easy. 5 questions. Here we go. Very easy. Favorite Nelly song?
Ride With Me.
Ride With Me. Mm-hmm. Hands down. That's also my favorite song. Okay. That's good. Second, favorite show that you got to play with Tim McGraw?
St. Louis Hollywood Casino Amphitheater is my hometown amphitheater. I've watched every show ever there.
Really?
Yeah.
That's amazing. And also, side note real quick. I saw that your friends came out and they came to the show.
Yes.
But the best part about it was you posted it and they're sitting so far back in the stadium. I'm going, wait, like Alexandra K's got her best friends out to the show and she came to get them backstage passes? Like,
listen, what's her
deal?
Those girls have backstage passes and front row seats at every single show, including that one. But it was my hometown amphitheater. And so we had like 40 other friends that all got lawn seats. Yeah. And so they sat out in the lawn with our friends. But that is like what everyone is coming for my throat on that video, being like, they're crying because their seats are so far back. And I'm not gonna lie, I laughed super hard at that one. Me and Nick were dying. I was like, y'all, how are you gonna do me like that?
I remember that. It's a very sweet, very emotional video. But then as you scroll through the comment sections, you find out Alexander K doesn't give out backstage passes that easily. It's all good. Look, we'll find out when I go to your show next.
Guys,
whether
Chris
I get a
didn't
backstage
even come
pass.
to one of my shows.
We don't have to talk about this. This podcast is wrapping up.
Burn.
You did burn me. It looks like I'm going to come to an Alexander K show soon, and I'm going to maybe get a backstage pass. Okay, moving along here. Favorite. Who was your biggest country inspiration?
Garth Brooks.
Why?
I've always loved his song selection. I've loved his songwriting. I love his vocals. I love all the inflections in his voice. I absolutely love his stage presence.
Yeah.
I love how he was kind of the first person to take the lines and move them to the other side. And as far as stage performance in country music, that everybody was still standing in the circle and playing the guitar and singing. And Garth was one of the first to add pyro, and Kiss was one of his favorite bands. And he just really merged like rock and roll stage presence with country music. And I mean, he's still the greatest to perform. That's why he's pulling 100,000 people in these arenas.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Also one of the best shows I've ever been to. Like, he sings every single hit.
Oh my God, it's nuts.
Yeah.
It's insane. What's the best piece of advice someone's given you?
Someone's given me.
Have I stumped you?
You have. I've gotten a lot of really great advice, but I think the thing that stood out the most is just, I mean, what Tim told us whenever we were backstage is that we're here for them. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And I never really thought about that before I would go out on stage. I wouldn't think about, I would be like, oh, I've got to be this. I've got to be that.
Right.
I've got to be perfectly on pitch and look great. And it was a lot of I instead of like them. And so whenever I go out on stage now, I stop focusing so much on myself and I focus on the crowd. And what can I do every single night to make sure that they leave never forgetting this?
That's amazing.
And I think it's elevated my stage presence like crazy. But also it's what makes me, stay after 3 hours after every single show and meet every single person that comes.
I was going to say, you and a couple other folks in Nashville, a lot of rising artists, I would throw Cooper Allen in the mix.
Oh yeah, Cooper does that as well. It's crazy.
My buddy Bailey Zimmerman does the same thing. They stay for like hours after like a show. Yeah. And I know that's something that's very important to you. I think that's amazing. I think that's so cool that Tim gave you that advice. All right, last question. Who's your favorite person in the 615 house?
You.
That was biased. All right.
I'm just kidding.
Bonus question. Who do you hate?
Thomas Mack.
who do you hate the most in the 615 house?
Thomas Mack. I'm just kidding.
Oh my God. You play both sides. Look at you. You've been trained for PR.
I wouldn't have been in the 615 house if it wasn't for Thomas Mack. I will say that.
He is goated.
I had to like beg him to call you and let me in.
Did you really?
Yeah, I was like, listen, I just had this song. It's doing really, really well. Like, it was number 1 on iTunes. Like, I've got like 200,000 followers now. Yeah. Can you talk to Chris and see if like you guys...
I remember that. And Thomas called me and then we met for coffee and then we hung out and then Thomas like vetted you like 3 more times. And then I finally said, I'm going to let you in. It was amazing. And you came and look at it now. You're funny. You're begging me to be a part of 615 and now 2 years later, I'm begging you to get on my podcast. Look at that. The tables turned.
There's
Unbelievable.
no begging.
It is what it is. You know what? I will say I need to come to one of your shows soon. You need to give me a backstage pass.
You got
I'm
it.
going to find out the truth as to
You're
whether...
getting lawn seats.
Really? You're going to bury me in the back of lawn seats. For real though, this is like such an awesome conversation. I feel like it's so cool. Like how we can get so deep and talk about all the stuff that we're going through.
Yeah.
Your story's amazing. I think it's inspiring to a lot of people. I think it's really cool that, even 10 years into the industry, you're like, crushing it at what you're doing. You're, making some of the best music ever. And I just am rooting for you. So, thanks for being on here and doing this. And, I'm going to come see you live now.
Of course. I'm so proud of you. This was so good. You're really good at this.
I've been working on my radio voice a little bit.
It's really good.
Is it good? I drank a lot of tea. I'm trying my lower voice. The funny part is then people are going to talk to me and be like, hi, I'm Chris.
And then at some point you're just going to be like in the middle and you're going to be like, all right, guys, we got to take a break. And now a message from our sponsors.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're going to be getting the bag.
I hope so. We'll see eventually. Look, if more people watch this podcast, then maybe we will. But anyway, thank you so much, AK. We're going to chat soon, okay?
All right. Love you. Thank you.
Love you. All right.